Hi everybody, and welcome back to the channel and the TT120 challenge layout. So the track, as you saw from the last video, is now all wired up. What we're now going to do is move on to some scenic stuff, which is always the fun stuff, and we're going to concentrate today on the river wall here. Some of you may have seen some pictures of the process that I've gone through, but this video will take you through all the different stages that I've gone through, starting from where I had painted it in a even brown colour using some Tamiya paints that I got rattling around in an old jar. This takes you through the weathering process, adding the weeds, and the thought process behind what's going on, which is basically, it's been here a long time, the river is tidal. Now if you look at photos of somewhere like Rye, the tidal element there down near the town, you'll see you've got like a dark mud colour at the bottom, thick and gloopy on all the walls and piers and things. Then you have a layer with some weed growing, and then you have the bit above the normal water line, which is just rusty or wood or whatever, but it's not really affected by the water. So that's what I'm trying to go for on this part of the river here. So we're looking at a muddy bottom, a weed layer, and the above the waterline colours. So I'll see you at the end of the video, and hopefully there'll be some useful information in this video that you can take forward with your layout. Anyway, speak to you soon, catch you in a bit. I've painted over the grey primer, having let that have 24 hours to dry off, with a Tamiya acrylic from an airbrush, and that's now dried for a few hours. This will allow me now to apply weathering powders, which will have something to key on to. So I'm going to try and just randomly pick some colours. I've got a bit of black, which I'll use around the pipes and along the top rail, some dark earth colours, rust, and I've also got out here more dark earth. So this one's farm dark earth, so I don't know what's the difference. It's a slightly different shade. But I've got hold of some of my old brushes. Not a lot of life left in these ones now, so it doesn't matter. I'm not going to use these on paint anymore. And I'm going to start with a little bit of black. And I'm just going to literally just rub a tiny amount definitely got a lot on there now. Just rub it in around here. Generally in a vertical direction, one way or the other. We'll just give this a bit of shading underneath. So I just knock off the loose. You can see where it's lying in there. And by doing on a bit of paper as well, I can collect it up after and put it back in the pot. Just randomly streak it downwards and up. So that'll do for a bit of black, and we'll get a bit of dark earth. So we'll put that brush in the black so we'll know where it is. A bit of rust. So you can see we've got some different coloured effects, and that's all I'm after, just a bit of variation. So I'm now going to just continue that along exactly the same, just randomly splodging on, working it down from the top. Now I'm going to go and wash my hands before I touch anything else. So hopefully you can see the variation that we have with those few colours of powders. It varies completely from end to end, it's all random. The colours on the screen that I'm looking at on the viewfinder are bolder than they are to the eye in real life, so it's a subtle variations of shades, but it's, you know, you can see all the different colours, and that's what we want. We don't want an even colour all the way through. So I'll now take this outside into the garden and give it a seal with some matte varnish, and then we'll be all ready for the next stage. So what I'm now going to do on my seawall, now that I've got it weathered and with powders and coated, is I'm going to try and add like a muddy texture along the bottom here at the low water mark. What I'm going to use for this is a bit of polyfiller for small cracks, plastic tub, a stiffish coarse brush. I've got some paint here just to add a bit of colour to the filler. I'm going to put a few drops of glue in it just to try and make it a bit flexible, hopefully, so it doesn't crack when I move the sheet about, and some water. So quite simply, I don't know if this is going to work, this is an experiment. This is quite thick, not going to need much, but easier to make too much than not enough. A big dollop. I want it in a creamy texture, so for that I'm going to add some water. I'm not going to go too mad at this stage because it's not the thickest of stuff, and I'm going to use a handle of another brush as a mixer. See if I thin that down a bit, make it more like mud. So that's come down quite nicely. Well, that's not a bad mix thickness wise. Dollopy, yeah, that'll do. Perfect, pretty much from the start. Just add a small amount of PVA. Hopefully that might make it a little bit elasticy. Give that a good mix in. And I'm going to start with a lighter colour first to see how that comes out. Got so much paste on my fingers. More than I need, well and truly, I suspect. It's quite red. Obviously once it mixes in it'll probably be quite redder than that still, so mix that in. Definitely too red, so we'll darken that down. And it's definitely too much. Oh well. runnier paint than I was expecting. I was thinking like it was oils, but no. So we want a dark brown colour. Let's see how this comes out. Well, not too bad. I want to go a little bit darker, I think, than that. It's definitely less red, so I'm just going to give it another dollop. I think it's close to where I want it. At the end of the day, we can always paint over this on a light, darker colour, which I'll probably end up doing once it's all in place and we weather up the whole riverbed together. Yeah, I reckon. Darker than that even. That's better. Yeah, that's a better colour. I'm happier with that. So we'll go with that. Right, so what I have is a drain here that will run down and drip and splash into mud and wash it out a bit, so I'm expecting the mud to be at a slightly lower level here than it will be in between, because this is just settled mud. So I shall just stipple it on roughly, just to give some texture. I want to maintain the shape of the piles. And just stipple it on various amounts. So that it's not smooth, clean plastic texture. I'm not going all the way up to the high tide mark. But with blobs of it thicker in some places than others, it will sort of simulate mud that's built up on the piles. So you can see you've got thicker, deeper bits here that's growing out in between the piles, and others that are, that'll do. And I'm going to continue that all the way along. The next part of this is to create some weed that's growing on the side of the metalwork here, and I want to use, it's like a foliage, I don't know what make it is, it's come with something, but it's quite a coarse stuff, but it's all small bits and bobs, and I think that'll look good as like seaweed. What I'm going to use to get a bit of a random effect, because I'm not going to coat it all like a garden, I'm going to use a sponge because it's going to be random, and just get a blob of PVA. I'm just going to stick it on the paper here. And I'm going to get a coarse bit here, get some glue on it and dab it on like that, and then sprinkle and stick it, make sure it's stuck into the glue, and carry on with that all the way along, and then we'll have a look at it, see what we think. So there we have it, all the way along, just randomly sprinkled on, and we'll tip off the loose and see what we have. And there we have some random seaweed effect. Remove the tape so we get the high water mark. And I reckon that's not a bad effect. And once that's all dry, I'll come along with the spray varnish and just give it a quick blow over. Job done, and we'll get it on the layout and see what it looks like. Right, what I'm now going to do is try to highlight some of these bits, and we're going to do a little bit of dry brushing. So I've got some white oil paint which I have been letting dry off and soak, and I'm just going to now very lightly highlight top down just to pick out the detail of the rail along the top. Having dry brushed since the last clip a bit of green on there and a bit of grey, and I'm not overly happy. I think it's a bit too dark, so I'm going to try and add a little bit more of a lighter brown. Just dry brush it in from the bottom up. I want to keep the top a bit dark, so it's sort of got a bit of shadow effect to it, but I don't want it too dark down the bottom here. So I'm going to try some of this acrylic paint I've got here. I've well and truly overloaded the brush, but I can brush a bit out. I'm going to go I think that's a bit better. Yeah, I'm happier with that. Yeah, I'm happy with that shade, so I'm just going to carry on all the way along here with a bit more again. Minimum on the brush. Too much, too much, too much, and perfect. And we just so I've got some of this. We'll give this one a go. Just put a few drips on here. just to make the bottom half a bit wet. Up to the top of the seaweed, and it'll also help lock in the seaweed. And put a bit of below the drain as well. And now we can leave that to dry. Time to go and clean the brushes. So having messed it up with the highlights, obviously you saw me repaint it and then reapply the weathering powders, which I did outside in the garden because less clearing up, shall we say, because it's quite messy in here, as you saw on the clip of adding the powders in the first place. So having done that, revarnished it, I've got back to the effect that I wanted in the first place. So I hope you now got an understanding of how I've achieved what I've achieved, and the fact that if you mess it up, it's not a drama. You just go back over it again and just add another layer on top. It doesn't really matter. You can just keep redoing, touching in, correcting, readdressing until you get the effect that you like. And that is the end of this video. I'll go ahead and I'll just glue this in with some hot glue just to seal it all up, and it'll be ready for at a later stage adding the mud on the river floor. Now that we've got all this wired and that in, I'm now going to look at weathering the track, painting the track, weathering the track, and that'll be the next video. So if you've enjoyed this video, stick around for the next one and we'll get on with adding more scenic detail. Anyway, catch you later. Bye for now.